Hello, everybody. I'm Elisabetta Adami, and I'm Associate Professor of Multimodal Communication at the University of Leeds. My research field is multimodality, and that is how people make meaning with anything that we use and combine to make meaning. My more recent focus is on meaning making in intercultural contexts, broadly intended as when communicating with the perceived other, not necessarily other in nationality or in the language spoken. Now, I need to make two caveats or anticipate two caveats before I start introducing my provocation. I look at sign making and meaning making. So I conceive of signs as resources that are intentionally associated with a meaning to communicate, and as resources that we make meaning out of, even if not intentionally produced with the meaning. I'm always at the level of meaning making, not at the experiential or sensory level, which are also important and are a theme possibly of this day. But my provocation has more to do with the previous seminar topic on aesthetics, possibly. Now, although I'm a linguist as a background, I'm particularly interested in meaning made by so-called non-verbal resources and how the meaning-making principles that are in place when we use these resources with perceived others might contribute to shed new light onto concepts of culture, communication, and also possibly also on how we use speech and writing in this context. So I'll use one example of this through the use of objects in a public space, and specifically in the window of a butcher in Kirkgate Market. That's this one, and that's Kirkgate Market is in Leeds city centre, and this is one of the findings that emerged during a 3-year project that I've done with other colleagues in Leeds, and the project was funded by the BHA and Leverhulme. It was called Leeds Voices, communicating super diversity in the city. Now, this butcher has placed a lucky cat in his shop window. You might see it better now. There it is. He has placed a lucky cat in his shop window, close to where he displays belly pork. And he did that to attract Chinese customers, because in his experience, Chinese customers frequently buy belly pork, unlike other customer demographics. So here he has used an object as a resource that's turned into a sign in its intended meaning, that addresses Chinese customers, and says, you Chinese customers, and then indexically through proximity placement draws the attention to an item that they might want to buy. From this example, we can ask many questions. Is the sign successful? What does it mean for a sign to be successful? Is it a case of cultural appropriation? We could certainly ask Chinese customers passing by what meaning they make of the lucky cat, and most likely we'd receive very many different answers. But that's not really my point. When I came across that shop window, I had recently arrived to the UK. The Brexit referendum had just come out with its results, and I started to feel particularly conscious of the popularity of an anti-immigration stance blowing across this island. The butcher has also a Union Jack outside his window, you can see here. And that's used to show the provenance of its activity and also of its produce. And within the Brexit climate, have become more and more triggered to interpret UK national flags on display as a nationalistic sign potentially associated with anti-immigration ideas. So in this case, me, as a recently arrived migrant, I've interpreted the lucky cat as a sign of openness towards foreignness, mitigating the potentially nationalistic and neo-nativist meaning that I would associate with the Union Jack on display. Although the lucky cat did not mean to me what the butcher intended to mean, it was indeed successful. It let me get in without fear, not in indexing the belly pork, which I didn't even notice, but rather in preempting a potential meaning of I don't welcome migrants. There is more though, because in the very same window, the butcher has also placed some plastic grapes on display.
He did that when fishmongers had been temporarily relocated in the butcher's aisle when their hall, the fishmonger's hall in the market, was undergoing renovation. Now, fishmongers have traditionally a higher budget clientele than the butchers. The butcher of this place told me that he thought he needed to decorate his window, given the many posh customers now walking by his aisles, going to the fishmongers. So in this case, again, he used the resource, the plastic grapes, that he thought would appeal to the taste of a perceived other, not in nationality perceived other, as with Chinese customers for the lucky cat, but rather in class this time. So people with a higher taste, if you want. That is, he used, in linguistics, you would say it's a case of hypercorrection. He used a resource that he thought would appeal to the register of the posh or the higher class. Here again, was this an intended cultural appropriation, even if it ended up using a resource that does not belong to the intended addressed audience? But also, was the sign successful? Most likely, posh customers would interpret the plastic grapes as a sign of authenticity, not certainly belonging to their own taste, but belonging to a somewhat inferior other, which is endowed with some fascination. So the principle is the one of exoticizing, not in nationality, but in class in this case, if that's the case. But now, had he done all this with language in place of the lucky cat and the plastic grapes, the butcher would have had to use Chinese to address Chinese customers for the belly pork. But in this case, failing to communicate to me, as I can't read Chinese. And it would have had to use some sort of English hypercorrection in place of the plastic grapes to address the posh customers, which would have, however, exposed him to judgments of being illiterate instead of being authentic. Most importantly, with language, it would have been difficult to identify these two cases as being the result of the same meaning-making principle, that is, to address a perceived other by using the resources that are perceived to belong to this perceived other. Now, more recently, I've left the analysis of the inbuilt environment to go back to observing digital contexts, and I have numerous examples from there too of this, but I need to conclude now. So I guess my core point of this provocation is that while sociolinguistics and applied linguistic research on language and culture and intercultural communication has long advocated against an essentialized conception of culture based on national or ethnic boundaries. However, unfortunately, intralinguistic contexts and interlinguistic ones are still considered as separate. That is, while communication among people having different mother tongues would be considered in the realm of intercultural communication, communication among people with the same mother tongue, and possibly using different varieties, would be considered in the realm of societal power dynamics instead, not within intercultural communication, when in reality, I argue, and with this example, that both contexts should always fall within the same case of communication with perceived others. Some research on languaging and linguistic repertoires and translanguaging, and Angela Kreis has done a lot in that, has done a lot to try to dismantle the separation. However, research on language has a very big obstacle that comes in the way, which the translanguaging scholars recognize. Languages have been nationally codified during the advent of nation states, so much so that we name languages with the names of states, such as French, Italian, English, etc. So my provocation to you would be then, what if we looked at meaning making with the other, starting from what we do with signs that are not made through language, considering that these have not undergone the same level of national codification? Could we possibly have a glimpse of different interpretative paradigms on how we communicate with others, and even more so on the dynamics that led each of us perceive somebody as other or as kin? And that's all from me. Bye.